Oh, God. Do I dare? Because I don't want to watch it for like too long. Right? The Battle of 2021, How to Fight Back, U.S. Presidential Tier Ranking. You know what? Fuck it.
I have been asked a million times who I think the top presidents were, so today they're going to tier rank the most notable presidents in American history. Before we jump in, this video is sponsored by Ring.
Capitalism.
On this tier list, we have 5 tiers. We have S, which I suppose stands for superior since it's at the top of the list, and then we have A, B, C, and F. Now, I'm really missing the letter D here, I will admit to you, because there are a bunch of presidents here who I think are actually D, but because they are D, I'm going to put them in the F category. We'll get to those in a moment. So let's start with the presidents who are at the very tip top of the list, the best presidents in the history of the United States. Obviously, on the top of the list, George Washington, our first president, kept the country together, left office peacefully. The father of the country, a great man, easy pick, right? George Washington as number.
Okay, so this is a common problem that I've definitely noticed with Americans and Canadians, is the idea of the first becomes this kind of superior, like, there's no topping that, right? Like here in Canada, it's about John A. Macdonald, and wow, you know, what a legendary figure, brought everything together, right? And oh God, let's see how many. Yeah, of course, lots of people are liking and agreeing with this because why wouldn't they? So, right. Here's the thing. Just because they're the first doesn't mean they did the legwork, right? In terms of who did the actual legwork for writing the Constitution, Jefferson, Adams, and Hamilton. George Washington was a military commander, and they all said, hey, we want you to be the leader. And he said, all right, sure, because like I guess there's at least universal approval for that keeps the peace. And then, yes, he left early on. Well, I shouldn't say early on, but he left after 2 terms, peaceful transition of power. That's a good thing. But at the same time, you know, it's not like he was really the visionary and the architect of everything. He was kind of the leader of their armed forces that they chose to be. It's how, like, if you think about it, there's probably more alternate timelines that exist where America is a series of corrupt military dictatorships rather than an actual presidential republic.
Number 1. And then everybody knows that the other president, there are only 2 presidents in this top tier. There are not 3. Okay, I know the left thinks FDR's in that top tier. I know some people on the right think that Reagan's in that top tier. Neither one of them are Washington or Lincoln. Lincoln is the other guy in that top tier. Beyond simply leading America through the Civil War and to a new birth of freedom, it was Lincoln who, as a thinker, helped to revivify the idea that the Declaration of Independence was an inherent part of the Constitution of the United States, that the two were inseparable. The ideas of liberty were not restricted to the Declaration of Independence as a non-operable piece of legislation, but actually infused the Constitution of the United States, and that liberty principles were supposed to be extended to all people of the United States, not merely white Americans. So for that reason, Abraham Lincoln is top of the heap along with George Washington. I'm going to start with the people who I think are just the worst presidents, like people who just were terrible. So,
okay. All right. I've calmed down from that good belly chuckle. Right. So Ben Shapiro's not entirely wrong here, talking about Lincoln being in the S tier because he led, you know, America through the Civil War. And yet the people who, you know, love to support Ben Shapiro are also among the many who would love to point out that Lincoln was a monster and actually bad, but for Republican purposes, he's the one who's sort of forgivable because, oh, well, he's a Republican. We can use this against Democrats because, look, we freed the slaves and all this other stuff. See, even though the party switched and all that other stuff. But I love how he immediately discounts FDR being one of the greatest presidents when it's FDR who got America out of the Great Depression and avoiding like another civil war and helped secure America's place as the preeminent global power in World War II and after World War II. And he's like, no, he can't possibly be that great because can't possibly show that maybe there are good Democrats out there, right? So already I'm having fun with this. This is going to be interesting.
So let's begin with the president who I think was pretty easily the worst president of the United States, without much of a question, Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson is a clear F. Woodrow Wilson is garbaggio. Woodrow Wilson was a vicious racist who was in favor of radical expansion of the federal government. He believed that the state should have no limits on it. He was effectively a socialist. He believed that the administrative government of the United States should be run top down by the elite.
How the hell was Woodrow Wilson a socialist? I don't recall him passing any socialist policies.
Awful, awful person, awful president. He is definitely in the F category. Other presidents who are...
Okay, I agree. Woodrow Wilson is an F tier president. He wasn't socialist, though. And in terms of what Ben said about, hey, this is, he wanted the executive to be as big as possible. To an extent, that's definitely true. He wanted, or he felt that the president should have a lot more control and influence, which, is scary. But he's leaving out a core part of the context. The context missing from what he says about, the historical class and, how much that they loved Woodrow Wilson. That was because in terms of solidifying America's place on the international stage, Woodrow Wilson is actually very crucial in that regard. Not saying it's ultimately a good thing, but he's responsible for a lot of it. Yeah, he got America into World War I and had his 14 points or whatever it was, and had a lot of foreign policy, which is why he felt the executive should be a lot more powerful. He's historically relevant for those reasons and putting America truly on the world stage as opposed to just being a hemispherical power, which had traditionally been America's worldview. Hey, we're America now, and we're not going to say yes to any more European colonialization of the Americas. This is our domain now. So he took that shift from American hemispheric interest into global geostrategic interest. That's why a lot of historians like him in that context. But he leaves that out because, of course, that wouldn't fit his narrative. Let's just get back to Ben Shapiro and his...
In the F category. So this is where I really wish that there was a D category right here. In what would be the D category, but we're going to have to push him into the F category because we really have no other choice. There is no D category here. LBJ definitely goes in that category, in that F category. So LBJ, awful president. The sole bright spot in the LBJ administration was a bright spot, and that was the Civil Rights Act. The Civil Rights Act, which is exactly right on banning all sorts of state practices of discrimination, is wrong when it comes to encroaching into private rights of association, and is wrong in some of its broad outlines as far as how to deal with the private sector. Everything else is garbage. The extension of the welfare state is garbage. The Vietnam War and his
By welfare state, you mean the continuation of the policies that Franklin Delano Roosevelt introduced that helped lead Americans through periods of successive prosperity post-Depression? This is my problem with a lot of people online, is they leave out important context. It's not that they're always entirely wrong, but context provides everything. He's talking about that being the one bright spot, and it's a very important bright spot. But at the same time, Lyndon Johnson was terrible in some other ways, especially with what he did to a Canadian prime minister. But, Lyndon B. Johnson was still very important in terms of America as a whole, not just for the Civil Rights Act and getting rid of those laws, which is why it's also interesting that I haven't really heard too much from Ben Shapiro about how bad it is that voter suppression continues in southern states. I've covered this stuff, but he hasn't yet. He's pointing out here, oh yeah, it was a bad thing, and he just kind of skips over it, right? So I'd love to see if he did any more proper stuff on that.
Strategy in pursuing the Vietnam War, graduated equilibrium, horrible.
He's a libertarian, remember, so any social programs will be F tier for him. Right, yeah, silly me. Taking care of people is, bad in America.
Horrible garbage, right? So LBJ, terrible president. He definitely goes in that bottom tier along with Woodrow Wilson. Other people who belong in that bottom tier, and the much beloved FDR goes in that bottom tier. Despite historians' attempts to paint FDR as a wonderful president, it's pretty obvious that he lengthened the Great Depression by as much as 8 years, according to a study from UCLA Anderson Business School, through his horrific economic policies.
His policies saved America and prevented a second civil war, and it got America, his New Deal got America and Americans out of the Depression. The reformed policies ended the Dust Bowl in Kansas. Like, holy shit.
Some people have FDR in like the top tier of presidents. No effing way. No way. Okay, other...
I love how he's like here's the sort of insidious aspect of Ben Shapiro and the right-wing grifters, right? Right at the top, it's, oh, look, we're going to start with the S tier, right? Boom. Republicans, or, imagine Republicans, conservatives, or at the very least in George Washington's case, both sides can agree, oh yeah, he's the greatest because he was the first, right? I think it's bizarre that he puts FDR and Lincoln in opposite tiers. Yeah, I agree, and we're going to touch on this, right? So, right there, it's like, boom, at the top S tier, and then at the bottom, look at all these terrible, scummy, slimy F tier Democrats, and he's starting with all the famous ones that Americans might have some familiar knowledge of. Take note of who he's not putting down there, which are the presidents immediately preceding the Civil War, which are considered to be the worst American presidents in history. But he's not being genuine and putting them as like, yeah, hey, the absolute worst. Like, watch, I'm sure he's going to put just to start, right? Trump gonna be like, sure, he's not S tier, but Trump's gonna be A tier, right? Whoever this is, like Buchanan or something, he's gonna be like F tier. Same with Ulysses S. Grant. Barack Obama, he's probably gonna say, oh, it can't be too racist, so we're gonna put Obama in like C tier, and Nixon will also be in C tier. And Teddy Roosevelt, he might be A tier. Jimmy Carter's going to be F for sure. Grover Cleveland, that looks like, is going to be F tier for sure. Kennedy, he's probably going to say C or B. And Eisenhower, being Republican, is going to be A tier. This is just my guessing right here.
Presidents who belong in that bottom tier of presidents. I'm put Richard Nixon in that bottom tier of presidents. I think Nixon was a terrible president. I know there are a lot of Republicans who have sort of a warm spot for Nixon, mainly because he was not George.
I think he'll put the antebellum presidents in F tier, but it's super telling that FDR and Johnson go in there first. Yeah, exactly, right?
He pursued the opening of China, which has resulted in the rise of a dictatorial empire that now threatens American power in Southeast.
Oh, I need to hear this again.
Of a dictator, he dismantled the vast government apparatus that was built by LBJ. In fact, he exacerbated that. He pursued the opening of China, which has resulted in the rise of a dictatorial empire that now threatens American power in Southeast Asia.
Okay, so China was dictatorial, or at the very least authoritarian, since before Nixon had the open China policy. And again, in terms of geostrategic importance, it was good to get China out on the open world scene again, because it meant that it could prevent a sort of solidarity with the Soviet Union. It opened up a kind of extra avenue in the idea of the three worlds, right? You had the first world, which was the West, the second world, which was the Soviet Union and its allies, and then you had the third world, which was everyone else. So in terms of that, it was a good thing. And they recognized, because guess what, Ben? Capitalism. Wow, that's 1 billion people market there that we could have. So we would really like the pro-business Republican presidents to pursue policies that open up economics with, whether there are enemies or not, because money, 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 money. But of course, he doesn't want to mention this and probably doesn't even see this, and instead thinks of, oh, it's a dictatorial power. It was, authoritarian and dictatorial before that, and it still is now, because thank you, Mao. It's like he's leaving a lot of stuff out. It's not that he is wrong in a lot of his assessments. It's that he's leaving a lot of stuff out and a lot of key important context, which then changes the nature of what he's trying to articulate, and he'd have to be way more fair in terms of his grading, but he can't do that. He's got a team of people behind him saying, look, the data and the analytics aren't good. If you want this video to be a banger and get money so you can continue to be a rich, wealthy capitalist, you got to do these things.
So not a big Nixon fan. I know there are a lot of people who are. I'm not. You could plausibly put him in the C category, but I'll put him in the F, just to be even-handed. And finally, as the last person who goes in that F category, there are two more for the F category. One is going to be Barack Obama. So Obama goes in the F category.
Oh, wow. I was generous when I thought he was going to put him in like C. Okay. Yeah. Oh, my God. The grift is real.
I think he was an awful president. I think he did horrific work, mainly with regard to his rhetoric. And in terms of his legislation, I think Obamacare was an atrocity. And I think that his spending plans with stimulus and raising us to $4 trillion budgets, It's helped destroy the economic.
He got you and a lot of Americans out of the shit show that was the 2008 recession, but go off, I guess.
Future of the United States. That's bad enough. But between 2008 and 2012, Barack Obama morphed from a president who sort of campaigned on almost a Clintonian third way as a guy who wasn't for red states and not blue states, but the United States. And in 2012, he went just hardcore intersectionality. Anybody who opposes.
Why did no one tell me Ben Shapiro was a fucking comedian?
Me is a racist. America can be divvied into various victimized groups that can be cobbled together in a new rising ascendant majority against the old America is extremely damaging. And I think that is going to be the future of American politics for quite a while. I think the Democratic Party never.
Also, the fact that he's only used the A, S, and F tier so far is indicative of how unnuanced his grift is. Yeah, like I know he said I can't put, difference between, D and F tier, which, okay, maybe that's true. Like, I don't know, but I'll try and give him the benefit of the doubt. So, okay, there might be, he'd use a bit more, but it is very telling that he's like, yeah, look, basically, like, all Democrats are terrible. Like, he's not saying that, but it's the clear implication, right?
Quite got over the Obama coalition of 2012. They've been trying to pursue it ever since, and it has broken American politics in ways large and small. So Obama goes in that bottom category.
I love how he thinks that Obama broke American politics, and it wasn't that the Republicans under John Boehner and Mitch McConnell, who had a strict no cooperation policy with Obama and the Democrats, he doesn't mention that at all and doesn't put any of the blame on them at all. It's all squarely on Obama and the executive, right? It's not the fault of the legislature that he claims is so important and should have power and relevancy, right? But, oh no, introducing that context and that sort of, there's more nuance to this. That wouldn't be right or fair of Mr. Totally unbiased, facts don't care about your feelings, right?
And then finally, last guy who goes in that category is, of course, James Buchanan, who is the president just before the Civil War. Now, to be fair, I'm not sure the Civil War happens because of James Buchanan. I don't think he does much to stop it. And so you have a bunch of events that are happening outside of Buchanan's control. Doesn't mean he was a good president. He was a terrible president. Okay, so now we've got your top category and we've got the F category. Now we're going to do some people who are in the middle. So in the A category, which is just below S, we'll put Calvin Coolidge. So Calvin Coolidge, really underrated president, because Calvin Coolidge is the last president in American history to truly understand that the presidency should not be a major factor in your life. He gave a speech on July 4th, and it's one of the great orations in American history about
like, but yeah, like, more people should just know about the Boston strike. I wonder if I'll mention
what America means and why the foundational principles of the Declaration of Independence had led to the prosperity of the United States, how the freedoms and liberties guaranteed to individuals had led to the prosperity of the United States, that we were created by the Declaration, we were created by the Constitution, we do not get to create it. It's really, really good stuff. One of the tragedies of American history is that Coolidge stepped down and Herbert Hoover took over, and Herbert Hoover was, in fact, quite a bad president. Who else do we have here? Well, I'll put Reagan in that A category. And now, Reagan's big problem as a president was, of course, that he didn't get the spending under control. He was also saddled with the Democratic Senate for part of his term. In terms of breaking the back of
so Reagan was saddled with the Democratic Senate, and that, prevents him from being truly great. But Obama saddled with a Republican Senate and House and stuff. Oh, that had nothing to do with it. Okay, cool. Gotcha, Ben.
Other presidents who end up in that A category probably have to put Thomas Jefferson in the A category for his federalist view of American government, what we would call federalist now, meaning he wanted to devolve more powers to the states. Also, the Louisiana Purchase, which is one of those weird moments in American history where he saw a good deal, recognized he didn't have the constitutional authority to make it, and then went ahead and made it anyway. But Jefferson is what?
So that's good when Republicans do it, but bad when Democrats do it, right? I'm sure that's going to come up.
Widely regarded as one of our better presidents. I'll put you...
No mention of the Trail of Tears, right? And the or wait, no, that was Andrew Jackson, I think. But like no mention of Thomas Jefferson then. Right. Sorry, I'm getting my terrible racist white men mixed up. Andrew Jackson was the Trail of Tears. Thomas Jefferson was all the slaves and the children he got by the slaves and never freeing them. Right. That's the guy.
Ulysses S. Grant, I think, in this category. So there's been a great sort of revision about how Ulysses S. Grant is portrayed in American history.
Okay, this is a part where I agree with Ben Shapiro. Like he's doing relatively decent here. What is left out, just as like a historic tidbit, is that Ulysses S. Grant wanted to actually buy at the time he was in talks with them. Well, not buying, but like acquiring the independent state of Santo Domingo, what we now call the Dominican Republic, as a, state or territory of the U.S. And then they would hopefully ship a lot of the black people there because they still didn't believe in intermingling. It was like, we got to keep the newly freed black people safe. It's so dangerous. Well, we'll just hopefully get Santo Domingo and then we'll ship them all there and things will be fixed, right? Like that's a historical tidbit that never gets talked about. He recognized he didn't have the authority to do something, but he did it anyway. Wild that Shapiro is saying that as a positive. I know, right?
Be presidents. So people who are like, okay, kind of okay. So I'll put JFK in. Well, I'm putting him as a C. JFK.
Wait, no, my grift. Must change the grift. Oh, geez, I was nearly half decent for a while. I was like being decent about Ulysses S. Grant, and then I nearly continued to be decent. Whoa, no. Whew. Glad that's over. Oh, God. Oh. JFK should absolutely be an A-tier president. I get that S tier has to be something a little special, in which case, okay, George Washington to an extent, Lincoln, I'd put FDR up there. JFK, some could say maybe S tier, but definitely he should be an A tier president between starting to get the ball rolling, and especially with his brother Robert F. Kennedy, getting the ball rolling on the civil rights era and meaningfully beginning to address that and push for, legislative action for it. His whole stance on the Vietnam War, though, that's very bad. But, the idea of America becoming a more fair and open place and getting into space and this, explosion in American ingenuity and ideas and expression was happening in America just at that time. And he happened to be a president who had to, navigate it. He also had to navigate the Cuban Missile Crisis, which was damn near World War III. And you're telling me he's not A tier? Like, come on.
It goes as a C. One of the more overrated presidents in American history. Obviously, history has been more kind to JFK because of the assassination than it otherwise would have been. The man was responsible for a wide variety of debacles during his first couple of years in office, including the Bay of Pigs debacle. However, he was a fervent anti-communist who did cut taxes. But as far as him being like one of our better presidents, I don't see any evidence of that. By the way,
So right there, again, Ben Shapiro leaves out some crucial information. The Bay of Pigs was not JFK's responsibility. It was a botched CIA plot that JFK didn't even fully know, and not to excuse JFK or anything, but he didn't fully know the details or the plan. The CIA just kind of came to him and said, hey, we'd like to do this thing. He's like, all right, you're the CIA, I trust you. And, never trust the goddamn CIA on anything. And so, that becomes this debacle. And then he realizes, oh, geez, maybe I should actually be more invested in, these decisions and stuff like that. But no, Mr. Shapiro's got to be all about his grift about, it's the Bay of Pigs disaster and that's totally on him and not on the CIA and faulty information and intelligence. No, it can't be that. Excellent JFK impression. Thanks, man.
Engagement in Vietnam begins with JFK. It does not begin with LBJ. Let's see. Grover Cleveland we'll put in the B category. So Grover Cleveland, the only president.
How are you going to put Grover Cleveland above JF*K? Like, are you kidding me?
To serve twice non-consecutively. Grover Cleveland was responsible for making sure that the federal government did not outgrow what it was supposed to be. He famously rejected a stimulus package directed at Texas drought relief, saying that there is no constitutional warrant for this, which is something you would never hear from a president today. He goes in the B category. I'll put William Howard.
Okay, hang on. Hold up, Eggs Benedict. You're telling me that the lack of stimulus debt relief for a drought in Texas, which produces a lot of American cattle and crops and, agriculture and economic industry, you're telling me that shouldn't have happened and that it was a good thing, and that's why Grover Cleveland is better than JFK, Mr. Get Civil Rights and Space Race and diverting World War III? Like, what? Fuck you?
Taft in the same category. William Howard Taft was a far more conservative figure than Teddy Roosevelt. We'll get to Teddy in just one second. William Howard Taft.
Yeah, of course he was more conservative than Teddy Roosevelt. That's why Teddy Roosevelt left and formed the Bull Moose Party, because he hated how it was basically a conservative takeover and he wanted the progressives to have a voice. But then they split the ballot, and that's how Woodrow Wilson got in.
Was a sort of retrenchment of traditional Republican values. He went on to serve on the Supreme Court of the United States. So sort of a figure that's been lost to history and people make jokes about him because he was extremely fat. But the truth is that he was actually a pretty good president, and if it had not been for Teddy Roosevelt and his ego trips, then William Howard Taft would be more fondly remembered as the person who defeated Woodrow Wilson in 1916, which in 1912 rather, which would have changed the course of America.
Notice how he's also just putting some people in here like Grover Cleveland and Taft by, how they would have been had things just gone a little bit more differently and not, on their actual records, which is, if you were to be objective and fact-based about it, is what you would do.
In history, for the better in a lot of ways. Harry Truman is a B president. He tends toward the C. I would say that he's a B president because of his Cold Warrior nature. Because of his handling of the end of World War II. I have a personal fondness as a Jew for Harry Truman, as virtually all American Jews do, because of his willingness to signal American support for the establishment of the State of Israel. There's a famous Steele case in which he intervened in a fairly illegal way. And then not only that, his policy toward China was really bad. He should have provided significantly more support to Shanghai Shek in the face of the Maoist revolution in China. His failure to do so was instrumental in the rise of communist China. Also, his handling of the Korean War left some things to be desired. President Trump, I think, is a B president. Now, I think in terms of policy, he'd be closer to an A. I think in rhetoric, the problem is that he's really been self-defeating, the president. I think most people understand this. So he's had some real rhetorical highs. I mean, he gave a great speech in Mount Rushmore, for example, that I talked extensively about. He gave an excellent speech in Poland talking about the defense of Western civilization. He has said many great things in the culture war that I think are worthy of saying. He has also said some incredibly wild and irresponsible things over the course of his presidency. He has led to less support for his agenda items that should be wildly more popular. I mean, the fact is that heading into the election, over 55% of Americans said that they were better off than they were 4 years ago, and then he performed at like 46% of the popular vote. There's only one reason for that, and that's because he was so rhetorically irresponsible. Again, on policy, you got to put Trump up with people like Ronald Reagan and Calvin Coolidge. In terms of rhetoric, you got to put him much further down the list, and so he ends up on average being in that B category. He is not an F, as so many people keep saying. That's ridiculous. He is not even close to in the same category as people like Woodrow Wilson, for example. I did forget one F, by the way. Jimmy Carter was an F. Jimmy Carter was a...
Oh, remember how I said he was basically going to throw, like, all the Democrats, or as many as possible, into F tier?
A garbage president. So, as always, like all historians, I forget Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter was not a good president. Maybe slightly better than people recall, in the sense that he actually did try to bring down inflation in the latter years of his administration. Yeah, did so unsuccessfully, but slightly better does not mean good. He was still a horrible, horrible president, so horrible that he got himself blown out by Ronald Reagan, who was largely considered by the media to be this sort of jokey figure. Okay, C presidents. So I'm going to put Teddy Roosevelt in the C category. Again, were there a D category, he would be in the D category. Teddy Roosevelt.
Which, like, man, like, Teddy Roosevelt broke up the big trusts. He was a progressive to an extent. I mean, his foreign policy, speak softly and carry a big stick. Like, that's a huge, in my opinion. Got, all the natural parks and like this super manly man. You think that a lot of conservatives could respect it, but nope. It's like, he's actually terrible for like somewhat valid, but also no doubt a lot of invalid.
Roosevelt was the first progressive president. He foreshadowed Woodrow Wilson, believed in the rise of the administrative state and this massive federal infrastructure. He pursued trust busting, which was really an irresponsible policy driven by populist need to break up big companies for no actual legal reason.
to prevent monopolization and the unfairness that they can then direct upon their constituent, well, not their constituents, but upon their customer base. And that way, you know, helped end the Gilded Age and also allowed for Americans to start having more representation and real progress and democracy in their world. You goddamn grifter. Like
James K. Polk is an oft neglected figure. He was responsible for widening the borders of the United States into Oregon and the beginnings of places like California in recognizing the Texas Republic, the Mexican-American War. He probably goes in the B category.
Okay.
In the Texas states
let's
into
just
Oregon.
count
And
this, right?
And Polk
what is he
an
talk
oft
about?
neglected figure. He was responsible
Oft neglected figure. So let's see how he talks about this.
for widening the borders of the United States into Oregon and the beginnings of places like California in recognizing the Texas Republic, the Mexican-American War. He probably goes in the B category. Calvin Coolidge ended up doing.
Okay, so what he leaves out from that, because again, context is everything. The expansion of American borders into Oregon also nearly brought them into conflict with the British Empire and what would then also become Canada, because it's like right next door, which would have sucked for both sides. And he, again, you know, was recognizing the Texas Republic, considered recognizing some other breakaway republics, because what was happening in Mexico at the time was a fight between either a centralized or a decentralized and therefore more federalized Mexican state. At that time, the people in power wanted a strongly centralized state, which is why you had the breakaway republics of Texas, I think like Baja California, the Republic of the Rio Grande, and the Republic of the Yucatan. These were all breakaway regions at the fringes of Mexico that wanted more regional autonomy. And so he's not mentioning that, you know, Polk, sure, he was there for only one term, but he threatened war and also got into wars and conflict. Notice how quickly he skips over the Mexican-American War, which was basically an illegal land grab by the United States, taking like they increased American territory by something like a third, and they took over like 2/3 of Mexican territory. It was ridiculous. And how Texas became independent in the first place and how it was recognized is also pretty ridiculous and very shady. You know, Mexico wanted people to settle its northern frontier, so they invited a bunch of people to settle it. But then Mexico made slavery illegal, and so the white slavers who just immigrated to Mexican Texas didn't like that, and so they rebelled. This would be great foreshadowing for the American Civil War decades later. And so Polk just thought, oh yeah, well, you know, we'll help safeguard them. And then they made these talks about how if any Mexicans crossed over into American territory to fight or chase, you know, outlaws or anything like that, they would see that as an invasion and then declare war on Mexico. So what did they do? They kept deliberately trying to egg Mexico on in the border regions, especially around Texas, and get them to make mistakes, which sure enough they did one day. As they crossed over, they chased like outlaws, like quote unquote outlaws, over the border, and then just decided, oh well, you know, that's the excuse we needed. Casus belli, we're declaring war on Mexico. Ben Shapiro is skipping over all this stuff, and he even admits, you know, oh, I'm Devin Terrio, what's up? Hey, welcome, Devin. So you know, Shapiro's talking about, oh yeah, Polk, so you know, unknown historically, and he would have an opportunity there to actually talk about that, but he chooses not to and skips over all these terrible things that Polk and the American government did in terms of the land grabs in Mexico and deliberately provoking the Mexican-American War. But I would expect nothing less from a hypocritical grifter.
Doing that, but I don't think he pledged to do that at the very beginning. Dwight Eisenhower, a lot of people would put him in like the A category. I would even put him as a C. I'm not a big fan of Dwight Eisenhower's foreign policy. I think that Dwight Eisenhower's foreign policy, which was supposedly realist, actually in many ways
I'm surprised.
effectuated many of the problems that we see today in places like the Middle East. Yeah, I'm actually not a huge Dwight Eisenhower fan. Overrated. And then finally, in C presidents, I'm going to put George W. Bush as a C-level president. And that's largely because of the last 3 years of his administration. Okay, so there you have 22 presidents. There are a few who, in retrospect, I wish that I had listed here. Andrew Jackson should be on this list. He probably ends up being a B president mainly because of
Oh, the grift is real. Rise and grift, Ben. Rise and grift.
His policy with regard to Native Americans, he would rank higher if it were not for his rather nasty policy, to say the least, with regard to Native.
I love how, like, basically an expulsion and genocide of natives is, well, you know, that prevents him from being A tier, but he's still a solid president. Holy fuck. Yeah, a rather nasty policy. It's called genocide, Ben.
Native Americans, fighting back the nullification crisis, ensuring the United States did not break apart, be president, probably historically speaking, 10 years ago, you would have said he was an A president. There are a couple other presidents that we could rank here, but there you have it. There it is. What do you think? What did I get wrong here? Did I get any of them wrong?
You got most of them wrong.
Yes, I didn't. But let us know down in the comments what you thought. And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button. We will see you here next time.
I will be doing neither of those things, you absolute fucking scoundrel. Oh my God. Oh, Jesus.